Hey, it's me. Now I'm going to compare and contrast Bernie Sanders with Donald Trump and also explain what you can expect from a Donald Trump presidency. Because a lot of people are using old labels that have been working for many years, but you cannot, in this atmosphere, completely talk about just these few labels. You have to add some more to have a proper discussion. Now, I've talked about this before, that you have nationalism now, and Donald Trump is a nationalist. But nationalism can be divided in two parts, National Socialism and National Conservatism. Now, Donald Trump is a national conservative. What that means is you have the element of nationalism, which is a strong military, strong borders, and you have a strong cultural identity, and also you put America first, you put the nation first, nationalism. The conservative element comes in where you're conservative about spending and you make sure the country doesn't end up in debt, because that, in a way, is a security threat, especially if you're beholden to other countries for your wealth and your well-being. So there's also an element about using capitalism as a tool rather than subverting capitalism and having that kind of National Socialism part where the government co-opts these companies, just like what Barack Obama is doing, having Facebook or Google work for them to promote policies of the government and to help the government in return for favors. Whereas Donald Trump would more have an administration where they're choosing the right companies and increasing competition. Now, Bernie Sanders is not a national socialist, luckily, but he's a socialist going to communism. And he could just straight up be a communist. So it's different. There's no element of nationalism there. That's why Bernie Sanders wouldn't care about open borders. And it's not about the cultural identity of the United States. You will still have a focus on the freaks and geeks and people that are living on the fringes and giving them a kind of majority voice when they're an ultra minority. When you have national conservatism, you're also conserving many elements of the nation that are historical and things that have propelled the nation forward for many years, things that are forgotten when you come to a more open borders type country where national identity is diluted. But let's come back to the capitalism, using capitalism as a tool, whereas a socialist or communist like Bernie Sanders also cares about infrastructure. They would tax people and then have the government do all these big projects. And that's what you had also with Obama and the stimulus. Shovel-ready jobs. But nothing ever happens because there is so much corruption. And the companies that get it are friends of some politicians. Finally, a lot of projects just don't get done. Whereas the Donald Trump administration, he's a builder. Number one, that is already a huge advantage. He would pick the companies that are really experts and efficient and have them bid against each other so that in the end the prices are really low, it will be under budget, and on time. It will be super efficient and money saving. And it's like that when you compare and contrast Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders is all about taxation, about the government will do everything, the government will give everything for free. Whereas with Donald Trump, for example, healthcare, you will have increased competition across the United States, and the competition will be so intense and so fierce that companies will be forced to come up with plans for people even at the bottom level, cheap plans of real healthcare for poor people. Why? Because the other companies are doing it to have an edge on the other companies. It's pure competition. It is using capitalism as a tool. So everything is about competition, about companies. So companies can grow, and so for example, you have companies that are very efficient at giving healthcare for the upper class, let's say. But then the market creates opportunities for companies to attack the lower scale people and provide healthcare for them. And then they compete against each other. And so it goes. Competition will always create the best deal for the people, and thus for the country. And you don't have all these special interests corrupting the free market. When it comes to the military, Donald Trump already alluded to it many times that they're buying equipment and weapons that the military don't really need or want, and the things that they do need and want, they can't get because the politicians are not in the pocket of the other companies or whatnot. But again, if you have that competition, when you have someone like Donald Trump at the head, you will have expert people and looking at the bids and doing the best for the military and again for the nation. When it comes to trade, same. You will have top people negotiating the best deal for the country. Whereas with Bernie Sanders, when it comes to the military, first of all, there's no nationalist element, so he wouldn't even care about the military that much. But if he did, it would be corrupt politicians, especially Democrats, they're really corrupt, to manage the process. And again, billions will be spent for nothing, and it will be a status quo. But with Donald Trump, everything will become about competition, about efficiency, and getting the best deal for the people, for the military. And that is what a Trump administration would look like. We're talking about running it like a business, and he really can. So on trade, healthcare, the military, everything will be run using capitalism as a tool and using competition. And so to conclude, the difference is stark, and there are some commonalities where a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters will end up voting for Donald Trump. Because you have the same goals in some ways, but when Bernie Sanders is more about hurting one part of the American people to benefit another, that's not nationalism. That is straight up communism, and it's not related to competition. It's not related to lifting all boats. Whereas national conservatism and Donald Trump, it would be about jobs for everyone, increased wealth for everyone, bringing back manufacturing to the United States, reducing debt in the United States so that the nation benefits the most. So it's more about the nation, meaning the people are strong. Because you cannot have a nation where you have a lot of sections of people just not being well off. You cannot have a strong nation if the American people are weak, even part of the American people. So with socialism, you always redistribute, you're always hurting one part to benefit another. And you're basically taking the same pie and cutting it up in more pieces, and finally less people are well off. Whereas Donald Trump is more about making a very big pie, an American pie. And I think when people really analyze what that means, he's going to win by a landslide, which I think he will do anyway, because 8 years of socialism, it's so disgusting. It really depresses a country, so people are hungry now for real nationalism. And national conservatism is the best solution, and that's why Trump is really doing well, because that is something that can really work.